Howdy everyone, and welcome back to The More You Grow. I've got my co-star Ginger here with me talking about one of my favorite things to tell people about when it comes to gardening and doing your own gardening. If you've ever been like me and you've ever gone to a nursery or a garden center to pick out some potting mix, you are overwhelmed with the amount of options and different choices there are to make. You may be wondering, what's the best choice to make, or is there a best choice to make? The simple answer is just do it yourself. Make your own potting mix, and then you can have the Burger King special and you can have it your way. So today's video, I'm going to show you how to make your own potting mix. We'll talk about the different choices of ingredients, the different mixes you can make, and the simplest way to get a premium potting mix, a better quality potting mix for fraction of the cost of the store-bought kind. So let's get into it and let's go check it out, right? Potting mix, you may be at a loss for where to even begin or what the first step is. The first step is to get your base media. What's going to be your main ingredient, I guess you could say. So there's a couple of different options you can choose from. The main two big ones that you can choose are peat or coir. And when I say coir, it's spelled C-O-I-R. And there's a difference between the two, and if you talk to anyone, there's going to be people that are highly for one or the other. In this video, I'm just going to talk about them both as base ingredients, but in the next video, I think I will talk about the pros and cons of each one and why you might choose one over the other. So peat is a material that is called sphagnum peat moss, as it will say on the bags. That is from peat bogs. It's then harvested, dried, and we use it as a potting mix. And that is one of the main ingredients and probably the most used ingredients when you buy a potting mix in a bag. Now the other option you have is coconut coir, cocoa coir, cocoa peat. There's so many different names that it goes by, but it's using that outer husk of the coconut as a potting media or a planting medium. And so just kind of off the bat, one versus the other, there's a little bit difference in pH between the peat and the coir, where it's sourced, sustainability. I'll get into that in another short video if you want to know the pros and cons of each one. So what are some other ingredients you can use in your potting mix? Another common ingredient you see in potting mixes, especially the commercial ones, are perlite and vermiculite. And if you're wondering what those are, it's the little white, what you would think is foam pieces that you see in a potting mix, but they are not foam. They're expanded rock of different kinds. So depending on what kind it's made from, perlite versus vermiculite, they heat that, superheated kind of to create a porous stone that is good for drainage. It helps somewhat hold a little bit of water retention while also getting good drainage in there. Now, when you talk to some people, the perlite is not necessary, or they think it's actually not a good ingredient to add. So do your research on it. You can decide for yourself whether it's something you want in your potting mix or if it's something you want to omit. Just depends on your stance. Now, after talking about your base media, peat versus coir, adding drainage things like perlite, vermiculite, things like that, you may be thinking now is the time where we add our fertilizer. And you can. That is really an option that's up to you. You can add some compost in at this point, make a really good potting mix that way. If you use compost, I would sift it to get rid of those big chunks, because those could get in the way of your seedlings if you ever use it for seeds. As far as fertilizer goes, here's my suggestion for you. I would not add any fertilizer at this point. Why? Well, the reason why is because if you make a very general and basic potting mix, you can change it depending on what you're planting at the time. Are you planting seedlings? Do you have house plants? Do you have some kind of vegetable plant or fruit tree? Whatever it is you're doing, the fertilizer is going to be different for each one of those. So if you make a very basic potting mix, then you can take that and add 2 for each individual thing, which is why it's such a good thing to make DIY potting mix, because you can just have it your way at that point and you don't have to be bound by what's already in that bag. So what I do is I make a very basic mix, and I might add some high phosphorus fertilizer for rooting crops or something that I want flowers or fruits for. If I'm planting greens like lettuce or anything that's leafy greens, or if I'm going to do that for a foliage plant, I'd want it to be high nitrogen at that point. And that way it's going to give me lots of lush vegetative growth. And so for each use that I have for my potting mix, I can change up the fertilizer how I want at that moment, rather than being stuck with what I made the very first time. And that's really the biggest benefit to making your own potting mix. You can make it exactly how you want, and you can have a basic potting mix that can change in a multitude of ways depending on what you're going to use it for. Isn't that right, Ginger? Yeah. Hi, girl. Yes, you're such a good girl. Are you my helper? Are you my helper? She's a good helper, guys. She's ready to make some potting mix, so let's go get into that. So now that we've talked about the ingredients to make potting mix, let's talk about the process of making it itself. So there's a few steps that will change here and there depending on if you use peat or cocoa coir, but I'm going to show you how to make a cocoa coir potting mix today. So you don't have to use the same things I use, but I'm going to show you the way I'm going to do it. So one reason I really like cocoa coir is it comes in these really easy to carry around compact little bricks. This is 10 pounds, by the way, and this will make 2 or 3 cubic feet of potting mix, which is like one of the huge bags of it at the store. But yet it comes to me at my house from Amazon in this nice little pack. I really like this brand. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I really like this one. It's called, where is their brand? Plantonics. I really like this one because they use a inland grown coconut, so very low salinity, and it's just a really good product. Again, not sponsored, it's just the one I use. So I'm going to show you, with the help of my friend here, Marge, how to get this brick of cocoa coir into a nice fluffy potting mix. So let's go work on those steps. Alright, first step we got to do is we got to take it from this brick and get it into a potting mix. So you can try to break this apart, but let me tell you, it's hard as a rock. It is really compressed. So I just tend to get a large tub and make a whole big tub of it, even if I don't need that much. It'll keep, it's not going to go bad, but I have not found a good way of breaking this up into smaller bits, so it's easier just to soak the whole thing. So we're going to put this in a tub, and we're going to soak this in water for 20-30 minutes until it all expands and we can break it all apart, and then we'll go to start mixing that in with other things. So let's take this and let's go put it in our tub and soak it. That took a lot less time than I thought, and we have this wonderful, great stuff here. So let's get to mixing our potting mix. So again, there are other things you can use if you're not a fan of perlite. There's rice hulls, there's a lot of other organic and biodegradable things. Perlite doesn't break down, it's an inorganic, so it just lasts forever and ever, amen. which that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're looking for. But again, I use perlite in mine. I don't mind it at all for what I'm going to use. I would never put perlite in a garden soil, something you're going to put in the ground itself, because again, it's got some nasty drawbacks that would come from putting it in the actual ground out in the environment. But in a pot and potting mix, I don't mind that much. So let's get the mixing. I'm just going to add some perlite to this just to give it some expansion. You could probably do, you probably get away without it. That's just up to you. Again, that's a personal preference there. So let's get to this and let's get to mixing. All right, got some perlite here. It's not a whole lot. Just a few scoops for this whole big tub. And just mix it in real good. If this is dry, make sure you wet it down first, because you don't want to breathe in any of that really fine silica dust that's in there. So, again, it's not a whole ton for this giant tub. I like to add it just because some of my plants, actually most of them, need really good drainage. And sometimes potting media on its own will compact. Coco coir not so much, but it can. And so therefore I add just a little bit in there. Our coco coir here, coco peat, it's pretty, get that to focus. It's pretty fine stuff, no big clumps. And again, that is just shredded up coconut husk versus peat. And again, it's real fluffy. It's also pretty fine stuff, but it does have some larger chunks sometimes, things like that. That's usually not a big deal. And that's what a peat, this is what a peat-based potting mix would look like. So what we're going to try now is we're going to do a little experiment. I have some dragon fruit cuttings here, and I'm going to pot up some of these using, some of them I'm going to use the coco coir, some of them I'm going to use the peat-based potting mix, and I'm going to see if I see any differences or anything that I like or dislike about either one, and I will fill y'all in on what we're going to do. So all I'm going to do is take an even amount of each here, and we're just going to pot up these little cuttings. I'll show you what that looks like. Well, there you have it, guys. How to make your own potting mix for pennies on the dollar. I believe the brick of coco coir cost me about $20. The perlite, which again is optional, a bag of that, a few dollars, no big deal. And other than that, whatever fertilizers you add on your own. So pennies on the dollar. So I made probably a 50-gallon container of that for 20 bucks or less. Really, I don't know why more people don't make their own potting mix. You can make it how you want, add the ingredients you want, fertilizers you want, and make it just the way you like. So if you have any questions for me on how to make your own potting mix, any of the ingredients, things like that, let me know down in the comments. I'll keep y'all up to date on how our little experiment here goes on peat versus coco coir. And on that note, again, I'm going to do a whole video next on the pros and cons of peat and coconut coir, just to where you have a one-stop shop of your pros and cons, and where you can make your decision even easier on which one you want to use. So until then, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions for me on anything else, leave those in the comments. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Facebook and on Instagram. And until next time, guys, I hope you'll join me right here on The More You Grow.